Councillor Liam Walker is member for the Hamborough and Minster Lovell division, a cycling distance away from Oxford, but a respectable one. But so it's wonderful that the magic of Zoom has enabled him to join us this evening. He's also, and importantly, cabinet member for highways, and the words delivery and operations. And I think there's an awful lot in that we would love to understand more about. So he'll be telling us more about that. We've given him some examples, admittedly very city-centred, and I apologise that that's our role. We'll maybe cover some of those and then take questions from the audience. So Liam, if I can invite you to take the podium.
Sure, the virtual podium.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for inviting me along to speak to you virtually this evening, which, depending on how this goes, might be a good thing. But we'll see how we go by the end of it. So let me start really by telling you a bit about me. I am the youngest councillor, I think, still county councillor on the county council. I became a county councillor back in 2017, which wasn't all too that long ago. But really, I started to get involved in politics just after the 2010 general election. I'm from Witney, so no guesses probably who wrote me in and who got me involved, and so be it. And I sort of took a bit of a liking to the county council. I've always had a bit of an interest in highways and infrastructure, which was a little bit frowned upon really amongst my colleagues. Normally there's this progression. You're supposed to go to town and then district and then county, but I kind of thought, sod that, I'm going straight to the county council, and I did. I got selected for the Hamborough Minster level seat, but firstly to be the candidate. That was the first hurdle. There was another candidate that stood against me, but she didn't win. So you have a hustings first, and then you go to the ballot box at the young age of 27. No, I was 26 actually, because I hadn't had my birthday yet, and luckily got elected in. So I grew up in Minster level, so I was quite keen to represent this division. I now live here in Long Hamborough, so I've not really gone very far. I'm not very well travelled. Always been in Oxfordshire. So on the council, I quickly got to grips with sort of finding my way around the system and the red tape and the bureaucracy of local government. It's incredibly complicated. I sort of went in young, fresh-eyed, thinking I can change the world, and you quickly get reined back in and told differently, and realise the constraints of wanting to implement stuff quickly isn't always an advantage. And then, so I had many years of just sort of on the backbenches, and then earlier this year in January, the leader of the council asked me to join his cabinet and take on the role of highways delivery and operations, which obviously I accepted. It was quite an interesting time because it just happened just kind of before lockdown. So I spent most of lockdown like this, back-to-back meetings, really getting familiar with the role. In terms of what the role is, so many of you will be familiar with my colleague, Yvonne Constance. So she kind of looked after the whole portfolio before, essentially what communities is, and the leader has split it quite rightly. It's a massive role, and essentially it means that Yvonne can focus on the environment and the transport and the policy side, and I can focus on the nitty-gritty day-to-day running of the department and the sort of the little bits that perhaps have been missed over the years and not really had the attention focused on them. So it's worked really well. Obviously it's been a bit weird during lockdown, but it's been a real good eye-opener. Andy, you asked me earlier about sort of time being on cabinet. So it can be quite time consuming, I'm not going to lie. I've been in meetings since 9:30 this morning, but because I work full-time as well, or was full-time before COVID, I tend to condense a lot of my meetings to 1 or 2 days a week. I still have parish council meetings, so I have 8 parishes in my division, so I attend them later in the evening. But it's been really good. It's good fun. It can be quite stressful. You're dealing with a lot of negative stuff. I think that was probably one of the surprises of being a councillor. It's very rare for any councillors here. I can see a few names. You very rarely get a nice email, I must admit. But when you get them, you latch onto them because they're a rarity. Normally we are the butt of everybody's problems, and blimey, don't we get it all. People don't understand the tiers of local government, and it's amazing how many people think you're their MP. So we get it all. But hey, that's part of the job. It's really good fun. But as I touched on, I also have a day job. So I'm not a full-time counsellor. I work at Silverstone, so I'm an event manager there. So I'm responsible for all the traffic management planning for the circuit. So getting all their customers to and from the circuit. So you'll see there's a bit of a theme here with highways in that respect. So that keeps you busy, very busy. Now living in Long Hamborough, just bought my first house before Christmas. So yes, it's all going very well. So I'm really keen to, I've probably been quite blunt before in the past when it comes to cycling and active travel, which many of you will probably tell me tonight, especially on Twitter. But I think it's important we have quite a wide dialogue on this. And I'm quite keen tonight to tell from you the frustrations, but also for me to tell you the frustrations, because many people tell me you should be doing this, but by God, do we try? But sometimes it's really not that easy. And it's no surprise that budget constraints are our biggest problem. If we just had more money, we could achieve so much more, but that's not always possible. So that's a bit about me in a nutshell in a couple of minutes. Over to you, Andy. Questions?
Thank you. Catherine will be taking on some questions later, but I just wonder, you glossed over in quite a brief way that lovely phrase, the little bits that are overlooked. And I wonder if you could give us a bit more detail about your portfolio and in a way where it begins and ends. If I could get you to expand on that first.
Yeah, so operationally, it's so coming the winter time, it'll be all the winter maintenance that the team does. I guess predominantly it's potholes. There's no hiding away from that. I've probably become the cabinet member for potholes. They were the bane of my life, and they can continue to be now, because I hear about everybody's potholes rather than just the ones in my division, which is really good because we're able to do some really good stuff there. There's also those that might be familiar with something called Section 106. So the council gets essentially money from developers. Now, notoriously, the county council has sat on quite a hefty sum of Section 106 money, into the millions of pounds, and over the years, it's kind of been accumulated. And we haven't spent it. So my job, particularly around new developments, road agreements, is actually getting the team to move from design stage actually to implementation. A small example of that, just around the corner from me, I've got literally right next door is Hamborough Station. And it's taken 2 years to get 2 bus stops erected, which in my mind is absolutely ludicrous. If we're trying to encourage people to get on public transport, we've got to get the basics right. And in my mind, that is basic bus shelters, and we have the money there. It was sat in a pot, but it just hadn't moved from design to implementation. So it's those sorts of little details that actually we really are hammering it now and getting the focus, because we have to make that all those figures public by the end of this year, I believe, in terms of Section 106. There's obviously, as I touched on, the potholes. That's the day-to-day stuff, how the guys are going out and planning the surface dressing program, which is the loose chippings, which I know is controversial amongst cyclists, general junctions, drainage, and sort of day-to-day maintenance of the highways. Now, one of my frustrations in the role, and many of you might not know this, but because we have this 2-tier system, I was staggered to learn that actually, although we're responsible for the roads, the district council are responsible for cleaning them, which I still to this day can't get my head around. So because it's classed as waste collection, my constant battle at the moment is getting district councils to sweep up those loose chippings you see on footpaths, or you see in the gutter, or on footpaths, because it's the responsibility of them. That's an ongoing battle that we're hoping to change and to try and implement a swifter system to get that done, because particularly along the A495, we've got a cycle path, shared cycle path, and it's forever covered in stones and chippings and that sort of stuff. So there needs to be a bit of better working relationship there. And I guess finally, kind of the day-to-day traffic management. So we have a traffic control system, traffic control centre in place in Kidlington, although they're currently working from home. And that basically is the day-to-day running of the network, which you and I, as we drive around, have no idea it's going on, because it's all happening in the background. able to tweak junction lights, all those sorts of things to help traffic flow. Believe it or not, I know you probably tell me we don't do that, but it is a vital service. And actually around accidents as well, getting that communication out via social networking and liaising with the bus companies. In fact, that's really important in the city. You know, if there's a diversion route, it's alerting the bus companies early on so they're not sat in the congestion as well.
From Don. Thank you.
And there's some questions come through. Shall I ask them?
Yes, please.
Yep, okay. So from Peddle & Post, Liam, just a question about Tranche 2. Are there any details on Tranche 2 yet? And what will it be used for, anything beyond connecting Oxford?
I knew this would be question number one. So no, we've not heard anything on Tranche 2 yet, which we're slightly, there was this supposed to come up last week. But what we're suspecting is that Grant Shapps is waiting because I don't know if you've seen, there's been a lot of backlash about a lot of the Tranche 1 stuff, particularly around road closures, which I know we were criticised for not doing enough of. But actually a lot of councils have now removed those measures, rightly or wrongly. We still have ours in place in Oxfordshire. So we suspect the minister is getting quite a hammering from MPs on his own side, local authorities. So I expect they're probably going to review the guidance for Tranche 2, hence why they've not made an announcement yet. So in short, we've not heard anything yet. But predominantly, most of Tranche 2 is to the benefit of Oxford City.
Okay. Question from Richard. What difference will I see to cycle routes in Oxford in a year's time?
Say that again, sorry.
What difference will I see to cycle routes in Oxford in a year's time?
In a year's time, I'm going to be honest, probably not a lot. I think probably one of the positives that have come out of the tranche, the active travel funding, as much as you've probably seen me say it's been quite a resource heavy to the council, is it's really helped us to focus our minds and actually look at where we're not doing stuff properly. One thing that come to me quite quickly, and people pointed out, is actually in our bid, we had basically put cycle maintenance in there. And when I went to our team and said, well, why aren't we doing this anyway? I sort of got blank expressions. Actually, the cleaning of footpaths and clearing back and what we call siding, i.e. getting the mud off the footpath, that should be standard. There's no hiding from that. And many of you were very right in telling me that. So actually, we're able to roll that forward now because it's only cost about £200,000 to achieve most of that on a lot of key cycle routes. So in terms of a year's time, I don't expect there'll be much change. As I touched on earlier, a lot of it's about funding, and I think we probably need to shift and reallocate some of our highways budget. I think the focus, rightly or wrongly, has been on roads for a long time, but I think actually this whole process has sort of woken up the council to how we probably should be spending money better, even if it's only a small proportion. I think it's a start. So yeah, not much in a year, but just bear with us on this.
Jamie's asked how he could get his street to become a low traffic neighbourhood. What's the process for getting a low traffic neighbourhood?
You've got to collar my colleague Yvonne Constance, and I'm sure she'll be delighted. So Yvonne looks after that side because it's policy. So collar her, and I'm sure she'll be delighted. I think there's a number of low traffic neighbourhoods that are coming into place in Oxford. The exact details I'm not too familiar with.
What do you think they're like from a traffic flow perspective, low traffic neighbourhoods?
I think they're very good. I think they seem to be extremely popular. I quite like Walton Street, for example. Slightly controversial, I know, but I think it's a way forward to reduce congestion and car flows. Not just in the city. I think we can do low traffic neighbourhoods also in some of the market towns. I think particularly Witney, Banbury. I think the focus is always Oxford, but I think we can certainly do some in the market towns as well.
Okay. So sorry, Andy, sorry, go on.
Only just to check with Liam, one thing, and I see Sarah's asked it as well, is are you saying that the County Council has no control, if you like, over the way that bike tracks alongside main roads are maintained? Because that's what I understand you're saying, so that when the turf grows in so that you've hardly got more than a bicycle wheel width, that's a district council responsibility. Could you just clarify that?
No, so yeah, to clarify, so if there's dirt on the footpath, that's district council because that's classed as waste. If it's mud, overgrown grass, birds, that sort of stuff, then it falls onto county council.
So to follow up from that, do you have either a discrete budget for that, or a priority system, or even an inspection system to go round and look at the state of different bike facilities around the county?
So we do, and that's kind of my point. We haven't done that enough. So I think a lot of that work has been reactive, normally through local councillors or lobby groups, kind of like yourselves, or through people that have reported it on Fix My Street. But I think, as I touched on, what this whole active travel programme has sort of reminded us is that we haven't had that focus before. Now, footpaths are, generally maintained, not to the best standard. I'm not going to polish it up and lie, to the standard we want. But we've kind of just got by for some years, and I think, as I say, that now will start to change because this.
Thank you. Sorry, Catherine. I just wanted to.
No, that's fine. Now, there's a question actually a bit related to that. Do you consider cycling a transport mode or recreation? So, what's the attitude towards cycling?
Do I think of it as transport? Yes, I do. Yes. Yeah.
So it should be part of the road work then. Any road change, then cycling should be part of that.
Yeah. So one of our biggest challenges is road space. So particularly in Oxford, if you've got existing width, you can achieve that. But a lot of, I think of the A495, which runs through my village and most of my division, there's not the capacity to widen the road because you're in people's homes and driveways. I think if we could rewind and go back in time, we should have perhaps made the highway space a lot wider, but we didn't because we didn't know we were going to be having these sorts of conversations. But I think actually that falls into my role in terms of looking at new developments, actually making sure we're not always using the same old shared cycle path, actually having a segregated cycle path. So I think there's a lot of work to be done there, but it's a lot of it's again down to budgets and finance.
Now, a couple of questions about the B044. Why not use it to create, so the 106 funds, why not use it to create segregated active travel path from Saltcross to Hanborough Station?
So I'm not sure what 106 agreement. I know we've got a route going up Lower Road which links the Saltcross in entrance to Hanborough Station, but again they've not committed to the full allocation as it stands. In terms of the B404 cycle path, obviously that was part of our bid for the A40. And I kind of touched on it earlier, well, I touched on it before about the complications of working with government. It's the two departments didn't really talk between communities and transport. In our mind, transport is saying it doesn't create more homes, but actually the people that move into those new homes are going to want to commute into Oxford, and going via a cycle path is one of those routes if we want to get them out of their cars or not necessarily using public transport. So there's a lot of departments don't talk, and I think we have this same problem at county and district. Again, I get quite frustrated. We don't have a planning team as such compared to district councils. We have a basic team which will give a highways comment, but it's nowhere near the size of a planning team that you have at district council. So when it comes to infrastructure, it falls onto us as a county council to put forward suggestions, but actually we need almost a wider plan or district plan that can sort of join all these dots together. I think it's too disjointed at the moment, and we're often on the back foot. I have a similar case on the A. Sorry, I talk a lot about my own division, but on the A495, we've got what we call the missing gap between North Lee and Long Hanborough, where you're currently required as a cyclist to go up through the village of North Lee and back down. Well, nobody does that. Instead, they risk their lives on the A495, which is a very fast road. And we've got a lot of these sort of little gaps of cycleway and footpath right across Oxfordshire. Briefly, Section 106 is linked to development, so we can't, if we have development here, for example, we can't then spend it in another village. It has to be linked to that development site.
But, and Catherine, sorry, just to butt in again. Sarah Watkinson in Blaydon was very concerned that she understood that there was a plan to calm traffic through Blaydon as part of the 4095, but that's not now going to be a priority. But clearly, Liam, it sounds as if you recognise that cycling along the A4095 is actually a useful route for people. And is there anything that you can do to take that particular initiative forward outside the Emergency Active Travel Fund?
Yeah, absolutely. As I touched on, I think this is really, the Active Travel Fund has really focused our minds as individuals and as a council now. I think we're going to see, I hope, a sort of a change of direction. In terms of traffic calming in Blaydon, I'm not aware of anything. Obviously, the councillor for Blaydon is the leader. I've not certainly, he's not spoken to me about any sort of traffic calming. I think what we really need to factor in Blaydon is the fact that 28 is going to get over the next few years when the works on the A40 starts, because that's going to be a massive project. And the A495 naturally is going to, sadly, be the route that most people are probably use.
Liam, something happened to the sound there. Was it everybody? Yeah, something happened to the sound there.
Hey, sorry, did you not get that bit?
I think maybe you hit something, or anyway, I didn't hear that.
Which bit didn't you hear? Sorry.
Quite a lot of that answer. It suddenly went very fuzzy, and I think it was everyone. Everybody looked a bit uncomfortable.
Okay. In short, I'll look into it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Are there any cycle superhighways being planned? Somebody suggested to Iceland, but are there any cycle superhighways being planned?
No, not that I'm aware of. Again, it probably goes back down to space. It might be something we can achieve on new developments, but in a lot of towns now, we're quite restricted on where we can put things like that because of the width of the highway. Most of it now is quite cluttered and built on.
Catherine, do you want to, should we just ask, because we've talked a fair bit, which is wonderful, about further out from Oxford, but work has just started on the Botley Road, and it'd be interesting to know, firstly, what your involvement is now that it's happening, and it looks like implementation with a capital I, and also Liz asks whether you've changed the plans in the light of trying to get more people on bikes and the fact that there are fewer people going on buses. So any comments on the Botley Road implementation?
Yeah, in terms of the Botley Road scheme, yeah, that sits with me now as delivery. In fact, it was one of my first weeks in the job was getting a briefing about Botley Road and taking that in. Yeah, ironically, we didn't predict COVID, and this scheme's been in the pipeline for many years, and now we're actually seeing reduced usage of buses. But we're still obviously pressing ahead with that because we've secured the funding to deliver the project. We can't just stop it now. So there has been no change to the plans. Obviously, if you change plans, you then have to go back through planning. It's very complicated. We're pressing ahead with what we've got. I believe cyclists and lobby groups were quite heavily involved in that. Certainly I was told that was the case. I know there was still a few outstanding things that a few people weren't happy about, but I think generally the scheme's really positive, and it sort of ticks the boxes for active travel and pushing more people towards public transport, which is good.
It's a question that was submitted beforehand. What do you consider the council should be doing to tackle traffic congestion, air pollution, and climate change? A very general question, but what do you think you should be doing?
So as of Friday, traffic levels I'm very sad, I get a Friday report of congestion, and we're still about 18% down in Oxfordshire, believe it or not. But it's amazing how much of a difference schools going back makes a massive difference to the road network, particularly around those peak times. It's very difficult, and someone tweeted me about this morning, that Whitney was full of cars, and we can do I feel we can only do so much as a council before people will choose to drive a car. It's convenient. And it's cheap, much cheaper than public transport. And until we change that and address that, I can't see how we're going to shift. I think it's a big challenge in the rural areas. I've got a lot of, excuse me, a lot of constituents, for example, that got a couple of kids and they don't all go to the same school, which is a massive problem. Actually, they're having to then whiz around on the roads to drop their kids off. I think in the city, I'm quite a big fan of the not the congestion charge, the zero emission zones. I think really once we hit the gas with that, it's gonna make a big difference to the city. And generally, free parking at park and rides is another one of something I would like to see implemented. It's something we should never have sort of got rid of. It used to be free to park your car. Because ideally we don't want the cars going into the city. Now, we did run a scheme for August to have free park and ride. Originally it was only going to be Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday to support the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, but I said, well, let's do it for the whole week. It seems silly to just only do it for 3 days. And actually it didn't cost us too much. It wasn't too bad. All the puzzled looks on the officers' faces when I suggested that, because free isn't free. It does cost somewhere. It comes out of someone's budget. But again, we need to do a lot more work with the city. I do feel the city council is, like some of the districts, is quite quick to say, well, it's congestion, it's the county council, but actually, we've got the Westgate Centre, to be blunt, that's got a massive car park that's right underneath it. So naturally, you're encouraging cars to travel into the city, which should never have happened, but it did, and that's what we're living with now, as well as other car parks. In West Oxfordshire, where I am, again controversial amongst some of my district council colleagues, but we have free parking for 6, 7, 8 hours. I think it goes up to now, which obviously naturally attracts people to go into the town centre. That that's important. You've got to have the right balance. In my mind, 2 hours is long enough. I don't quite know what you're doing longer than 2 hours, but actually we find that a lot of people are using it. Witney generally is a bit of a park and ride. Going into Witney, parking the car, and then getting on the bus. So we've got to all start working together better, I think, to reduce congestion. I feel it's a bit of a blame game at the moment. No one's really taking responsibility, and that includes you and I, and residents need to take responsibility. I just bought a new bike a couple of weeks ago, and actually it's deciding, do I cycle to the shop or do I drive to the shop? I try and cycle more, kind of depends on what I'm buying. But it's just making those switches and reducing part of the journey. I think it's very difficult, particularly where I am in the rurals, to try and if I went to a parish council meeting and banged on about cycling, I'll probably get booed off, to be blunt. They're not hugely supportive of it. They don't agree with the attitude of we should be getting everyone to cycle. I think we've got to change that attitude. I get a lot of complaints when buses, for example, get scrapped or reduced. But people aren't using them, and as I touched on with free parking, why would you pay to get on a bus to go into a town centre when you can get in your car and park for free? It's a bit of a no-brainer, so we can't expect people to sort of come with us on this journey if we're not working together to change policy and change the way we're doing those sorts of things. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant.
That's fair enough. So what do you see as the general question again, what do you see are the priorities for roads in the county?
Fixing them. So we, our budget's about 35 million, and we need, I think it's about 160 million to get roads in Oxfordshire up to scratch. It is very painful. We just simply don't have the budget. It's a huge frustration. There's no hiding from the truth. We don't have the funding for it. So actually, what my job is now is making sure the money we've got, we spend it better. I think there's a lot of waste on a lot of schemes. There's always a bit of fat on all these sorts of costs and contracts, and that's currently the stuff we're whittling through now, and how we deliver that service better. So we've got a long, hard slog to get that up to scratch. We're always going to be chasing our tail. We get very minimal from government. There's always big announcements of, well, a bit like active travel, quarter of a billion pounds, and when you narrow it down, we got just over £1 million. and it's kind of the same with potholes. We normally sit around 1.8, just under 2 million every time there's an announcement, which is great. I'm always happy to take on free money. I'd never tell the government not to give it to us, but it's just not enough really. We're just sort of tinkering around the edges when it comes to roads.
There's a question that's sort of related to roads where it's not possible to widen the road. Would you consider reducing traffic speeds to make cyclists more confident to cycle? Because one of the problems is obviously not, people who don't cycle a lot, getting them to actually get on their bikes when they don't feel safe.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. Actually, creating a sort of next generation of cyclists, we're not going to do that if kids and teenagers aren't confident to start on the road. Yes, this again, I think this whole process has helped focus our minds on where we can achieve that in terms of segregation. I'm not a fan of just putting white paint on the floor. I don't think that's hugely successful. Yes, it's cheap, but it ticks a box, but it doesn't really. I don't think it really helps with what we're trying to achieve. So watch this space on that one.
There are a couple of questions on the Bottley Road project. Are you okay with that one?
Yes, you can go back.
People are not particularly happy with the design.
Yeah, I mean, as I touched on, there was a group of cyclists that are quite involved in that. So, I think there were a couple of issues they were unhappy about, but from the early stages, my understanding is those groups weren't involved, and the council took them on board, and there was quite a lot of work that went into that. So I appreciate people might not be happy with it, but I think considering from the sort of first plan, that scheme developed quite well to a position that we're pretty comfortable we can deliver it within that budget.
Catherine, could I just, sorry, I'm always wanting to butt in and take advantage of being able to unmute myself and just say, so Liam, I know you just said you're not a big fan of white paint, but on the other hand, you are the cabinet member most involved in resurfacing of roads and therefore repainting roads. And so it is within your portfolio, I imagine, and we see these as great opportunities to rethink the way that road junctions are laid out. And I just wonder if there's anybody specifically taking these opportunities and thinking, let's not just do the whole thing exactly the same, but try different layouts.
Absolutely spot on point. And I see my colleague Suzanne Bartington's joined us, who's the cycling champion, and Suzanne will know this is probably the bane of our lives, that actually a lot of our officers will look at what was on the ground already and implement the same, to the point that actually on Friday we've got a training session. I put my foot down a little bit because I got fed up of seeing pictures. I saw one in Bicester the other day where rather than putting slow on the footpath, they just put low and left the S because it was slightly overgrown, which I couldn't understand the logic of why you would do that. And there's many other things. I know, particularly in Oxford, there's been a number of. In fact, the picture you started with, Slade, is another example of where we put white paint down and we haven't really quite engaged brain. So I'm doing it myself. There's a training session with one of our active travel officers, Patrick, and they don't like me for it, but they're all going to sit through the training. And then in my mind, that's if they don't then start implementing to our current guidelines of walking and cycling, we start having different conversations and going down different routes, because I'm pretty fed up of getting tweeted pictures of basic errors. There's another one on the A40 where they put giveaway markings on the cycle path, and there's nothing there. There's just a hedge. I don't understand why or who would do that. Whether it's an officer issue or a contract issue, we are getting to the bottom of that. And I know there's been a lot of pressure on the team to deliver tranche 1 very quickly. There's a lot of feedback from councillors, from local groups, and I think perhaps we rushed that and didn't quite engage brain before putting white paint on the ground. So that will change, trust me.
Question, how do you feel about CPZ's chargeable to fund more active travel infrastructure, safe cycling and pedestrian crossings and so on?
I'm all ears for any way of gaining any sort of revenue. You know, as long as it's not hammering, you know, those that are not able to afford and that are less well off. I'm open ears to how we can you know, gain some revenue to be able to invest again. So I'm all ears on that one.
So how would anybody give you that that feedback?
Drop me an email is probably the easiest. There might be some legal parameters around that. I'm not too sure. We'd have to look into it and feed that back in through Yvonne. I know these sorts of things are coming up with not just tranche 2, but we are looking at in the future. So now is probably the time to have that conversation and find out if we can do that.
So I guess that might be a question that was asked before, is how Cyclops can best be involved in perhaps, you know, giving advice.
Yeah, it's, yeah. Actually, I was thinking about this earlier today because again, we got a lot of criticism for both tranche 1 and tranche 2 in terms of not engaging really with a wider audience. Which look, I'm going to accept. Why that didn't happen, I'm not too sure. But in my mind, particularly around tranche 2, where we had more timing, we should have you know, widened our view a little bit. The county council are not experts on everything. And we need to rely on groups like yourselves. Now there is actually a climate CAG, climate action CAG, which I know Damien sits on too. And in my mind, we probably need to look at widening that. We already have the youth group, the name escapes me, Voxy, they're already part of that. So actually we probably need to widen that, and naturally I think that's where this group would fit in, because we're talking a lot in there about active travel and climate change. So that's something I can take away, and I don't see a reason why we can't have a representative of Cyclops on that group.
There's a question from Suzanne. Why does our white lining not give cyclists priority at side junctions? CG, she says the A40, A44 has been recently repainted, but it's not according to county design standards.
Suzanne knows my views on this. Again, it was down to members of the staff not engaging brain and not engaging with our current design standards, which, as I touched on a short time ago, is going to be addressed because it makes no sense. And actually, the A40 bit was something me and Suzanne communicated on, because when I drove up the road onto the A40, I was pretty surprised to see all this fresh white paint at every junction. And then when I looked across and saw some old farm machinery that's probably been in place since before I was on this planet, but we had put give way markings on the footpath, I wasn't very happy, was all I'll say. But we are looking at addressing that, and as I say, we've got a training session with the highways team and the officers that will basically send the drawings to the contractors on Friday. So after that, if there's any more cases after Friday, I would love to know, so we can track it back to who's signing that off.
The question about the bus gates, do you support bus gates, and do you think they help to make cyclists more confident cycling around the city?
I was hoping to avoid this one.
No.
Right, so bus gates. Oh God, be careful what I say here. So bus gates is coming to cabinet in October. We have to wait and see. We have to wait and see what the cabinet decide. My own personal view, obviously we have to look at the consultation. We had over 7,000 responses, which was incredible. So we wanted to make that decision today. Actually, it would have been cabinet this afternoon, but because of that many responses, we delayed it to October. I personally don't believe now is the time for bus gates. I'd like to see them implemented as part of a wider program. I don't necessarily agree with suddenly rushing them through. I'm probably preaching to the wrong crowd. You're all going to tell me you're in favour of it, but I think we've received a lot of anti-bus gates. Now, that's not to say that's the reason why we're making that decision, but the responses, and all I'll say is wait for the report, doesn't quite the way that some people might want them to. So wait until October.
Okay. Question about quality control, which I guess is slightly back to your white lines. How do you improve quality control and peer review, sorry.
Yeah, so
with maintenance, project planning and so on.
So this is actually something we need to do, not just for white paint on the road or footpaths, but actually across the whole department. It's something we don't do enough of, and to be blunt, it's a resource issue. We don't have a big highways team. A lot of it falls onto the same people. But actually, what myself and a chap called Paul Firmer, who is the assistant director and sort of my go-to director for operations, we're actually going to start visiting more sites more, so almost taking on that role. Now, it's not really what the cabinet member should be doing, but I'm a bit of a micromanager and actually quite like to go out and visit the sites and see. And if I'm able to identify stuff, which I have done in the past on various schemes, we're able to get them done a little bit quicker. I had an issue at a junction just up the road from me in North Lee, which our contractor had done, and they had left a rut in the road. It was only a tiny rut, but at 50 mile an hour you could hear it. And it was, you know, in my mind, we've just paid £100,000 for this junction work. It's quite a big project, and the fact that they haven't done it properly isn't acceptable. In my job, if I don't do my job properly, I get told off. So it should be the same for them. Now, it cost them 20 grand to rectify it, but I'm hoping from that they'll learn that actually we're spending your money, my money, to get these roads and footpaths up to scratch, and we expect better. So there's a slight change of tone and change of direction, but we don't do enough of sort of checking the homework because it's just a resource issue, particularly around, you know, between April and June. There's a massive program. It's just all the surface dressing program, you know, resurfacing. It's massive, and we just don't have the resources to go around and check all of those. We're going to be doing a lot more spot checking.
Catherine, could I just ask, Liam, Cyclops very interested in the concept of the road safety audits, and I wonder, we feel that they're not well used, and we're not quite sure how often they're really taken seriously. But is this something that you're involved in after a particular change has been implemented? Do you look at road safety audits, and what sort of conclusions do you get from them?
Yeah, so generally road safety audits are independent from the council, so we'll get a supplier to come and conduct that, which I think is quite an important point. Actually, we have no influence then on the decision. So we're currently, I know of a road safety audit for Barton Park, the junction there, excuse me, to do with the traffic lights and speed, and it's taken a lot of work. We're finally sort of making progress there, and actually the residents were quite confused because they're telling us there's a speeding issue, but when the road safety audit is conducted, we can't tell the guy or woman doing it that there's a speed issue. They have to come to that conclusion based on the evidence in front of them. Now, depending on the scheme, generally if it's new developments, we would conduct that process within the sort of sign-off period, so before we've signed them off. So for Barton Park, for example, despite the fact it's been there for some years, the road hasn't actually been signed off. So if the road safety audit, we haven't had the report yet, but for example, if it says you need a speed camera, then that falls on the developer to implement that, which is quite good. Otherwise, it falls onto our budget. That's just an example. I don't think that's going to happen there. So we obviously work with the developers on that. In terms of larger schemes, so like Botley Road scheme, when that's completed, when the A40 is completed, it's standard practice to have a road safety audit. We can do it on current roads, so regardless of sign-off. So, for example, at the moment, one of our focuses is the A41 as you approach Bicester. There's been a number of fatalities there, mainly due to speed, people flying over the roundabout, crashing into the roundabout. So we conducted a road safety audit there, and actually one of the recommendations was to extend the 50 mile an hour and the 40, which we've now done, and we've also created a hard standing area for Thames Valley Police to conduct speed enforcement, and actually that, from early suggestions, seems to have worked. So it's a bit of, depending on where the scheme is, depends on who's responsible for fixing the issue. But yeah, we do a lot of those.
There's a particular question about access to Headington. There's apparently incidents of segregated cycle paths that rejoin the road immediately before junctions. So this is obviously an old problem, not a new development.
Okay, yes. I mean, I'm not too familiar with access to Headington. It actually sort of started just before my time. But if there's, I don't believe that's had a safety audit. So stuff like that is useful to feed into your to the local councillor there, who can then sort of pass it on their locality meetings to the officers. And if that's a regular issue and not just a sort of one-off, then yeah, we could look at what we can implement to make that safer.
There's a question about wands. The wands are cheap and quick to install. Why are they not being used more routinely?
Say that again. Sorry. The
wands, which are cheap and easy to install, why are they not used more routinely?
The wands.
Liam may not be quite so conversant with our shorthand. Devices that are fixed into the road in order to segregate sections to keep cyclists safer. So there's some examples. The best we've got is along Donington Bridge, where many years ago people put down concrete curb edges, and so many places have actually installed these quickly to create segregated routes. And I wonder, or the questioner wonders, why we're not using them more.
I think we could have. I think certainly around tranche 1, there's probably some areas we could have done that. Why we didn't, I don't know. Again, it's probably unfortunately we went for the cheap white paint option, which as I said earlier, I don't necessarily agree with. We have been looking at doing more of this, and perhaps for future schemes we can include it. If anybody has any particular areas where we think we can do that and achieve that, then again, I'm all ears. I think of my own, it's not really possible to do that. But if there's the road space to achieve it, then I don't see why not. Why we wouldn't look into that. And that is something we factor in with new developments as well. Going back to that sort of policy side with separate cycleways. So I can take that back.
There's a question about the Greenways project. Is that any progress on getting government funding?
I'm not aware of that one. Greenways. Sorry.
I don't know. Do you know that, Andy? I don't know the Greenways project.
I have to admit, I'm not sure, and I'm just looking back whether it was the bike safe to Aynsham route, which made progress and then was taken off because the funding wasn't available.
So the B4044 cycle path, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I touched on that earlier. So that was so we had to pull that out of our HIF bid for the A40 because it was the Department for Communities was basically arguing that didn't encourage, didn't support growth of homes, which is ludicrous because the people that would be moving into the new homes on the Garden Village would use it. But they didn't see it that it should be part of the bid, so unfortunately we had to remove it, which I know was controversial, but we didn't want to risk losing the whole bid for the A40 because of that cycle path. I know it's certainly not off the radar. We are looking at other ways we can fund that. I'm confident it will happen. When, I don't know, but I'm pretty confident that it will fall into place very soon.
A slightly more general question: why are there no urgent measures to encourage more active travel at the moment? Because with fewer people using buses, the traffic has gone right up. So why is there nothing happening right now, sort of urgently?
Yeah, so I'm not going to say we did all we can, because we probably could have done more. But again, I think we were quite distracted by tranche 1 and tranche 2. Again, all these things fall onto the same people within the highways and team to deliver. We didn't have an extra resource. I mean, we probably could have done a bit more around schools, but again, in the rural areas, that's really difficult. We looked at sort of the quiet street, safe street stuff, closing off outside schools. But I think general feedback from schools is that wasn't too popular in rural areas, because it was, well, who's going to implement those measures? Who's going to put the barriers out? Who's going to sort of police it as such? The schools are already, especially during COVID, dealing with you know, taking kids inside doors and all that sort of thing. It's very complicated. So there probably could have been a bit more we could have done. We did do a lot around comms, to be fair. There was a lot of stuff on social media. But again, it's a kind of about personal responsibility. We can only do so much, I feel. You know, we can encourage people. And we've spent most of the summer talking about active travel. You know, there's probably a lot of people in Oxford never heard of the sort of words active travel, but they're certainly more aware of it now. But I think as the weather's changing, we're probably going to see less people going out on push bikes that perhaps would have done. You know, during lockdown, there was a massive increase. We all know that to get a push bike from Halfords or whatever was, you know, you had to wait 3 months to get a brand new bike, which is great. But I suspect a lot of those bikes will be now back in the garage or back in the shed, and probably won't come back out until summer next year, which is a great shame. But I'm not too sure what we as a council can do with the resource we've got to encourage more people to get their bikes back out. I know there's a push by government, but there's also a push by us as a local council to get more people on public transport. So it's all sort of all over the place in terms of trying to encourage active travel and get people to use public transport.
I don't know whether you know, but we've got 250 key workers on bikes and counting, and some of those are obviously people who haven't done much cycling before at all. So it's really important for them that they can feel safe cycling. A lot of them really, you know, they don't want to use the bus. They have to walk 50 minutes to work, and they would love to have a bike, but sometimes they feel quite nervous.
Yeah, I think there's probably a lot that employers can do as well in terms of encouraging more of their staff to cycle or walk. I don't necessarily think it's just up to groups like yourselves or to local authorities. I think also employers can encourage more people to walk or cycle. But again, I think it really depends on your job, where you are in Oxfordshire. I think you know, walking and cycling is a lot easier to achieve in Oxford City. But as I say, if I said to many of my constituents who now expected to cycle to work, you know, people say to me, well, why don't you cycle to work? You know, Silverstone's quite far away, and I have no intention on getting on a push bike to get there. But it goes back to my point very earlier on, is actually encouraging more people to switch part of their journey via public transport or by bike. And I think we'll slowly win the argument and win them over and encourage them to take this path that they've never probably really experienced. Like a lot of people during lockdown, there's a lot of people that have never cycled before or never really experienced it, have sort of taken that leap and been encouraged to do it, which is good. We've just got to try and keep them encouraged.
Well, it was lovely to see families out with on bikes, which was one of the really nice things.
Yeah, and sadly, as congestion's gone up, that has sort of gone now. To be honest, it's very rare. Certainly where I am, you see that now. But yeah, during lockdown, when you know, tumbleweed going across the roads, you know, there's a lot of that, but it's slowly shifting back. In fact, in all the press today, I think congestion in particularly around London is back to sort of how it was, if not worse than what it was before lockdown, because people aren't using public transport. They're now not cycling. They've reverted back to the car.
Is climate change not seen as particularly important by OCC?
I think it is, but we have to be realistic of what we can achieve. As I say, I sit on the climate action CAG, and actually one of our biggest percentage of CO2 is staff travel. We're a very rural county, and one thing COVID has been good for, which you don't hear often, is reducing that and actually less face-to-face meetings and more using this sort of method. So that's helped significantly. I think we do take it seriously, but again, I think there needs to be more joined up thinking between county and districts as well, particularly around planning of new developments. I'm here on a new development in Longhambra, and there was no electric charging facility. It was never thought of, and actually that should have been an option, whether to have it on your house to sort of future-proof it. I know our innovation team are doing a lot of work and sort of leading the way of looking at on-street charging. So I think we are taking it seriously, but again, we're kind of bound by the way it's going nationally. I think the UK has woken up to this issue. and it's not necessarily all about electric car charging, because that might not be sustainable for the future. So I think, in short, we do take it seriously, but we're probably somewhat limited of what we can achieve as an authority.
One suggestion is to tax private parking places.
Yeah, depending on who owns the land. You know, if you go into Oxford City, it's Oxford City who own most of the car parks. So if you're talking about on street, you know, that is done in some areas. But you know, I touched on it earlier with free car parking in West Oxfordshire and in Witney. There's no incentive at the moment to use, you know, to cycle or to get on the bus, because you can get in your car for a couple of quid of fuel and go into the town, park for free, do your shopping and leave. I think we just have to get the balance right between, especially at the moment, sort of our economic recovery. I think that is quite important. We are seeing a massive struggle on the high street between you know, reducing congestion. I think it will come. The difficulty at the moment is that you know, a lot of the buses are capped at how many passengers they can now take. You know, my local bus can only do 11 people, which is crazy. You know, so we've just got to get that balance right. But I think we do take it seriously, and we have really good discussions on the CAG group of sort of what we can implement for the future.
I feel we've it's been a pretty intense hour of non-stop question and answer, Liam, and we probably ought to draw it to a close. Damien Haywood, who is the opposition spokesperson for transport, would like to suggest that you and he spend a day going around the county looking at the cycling issues, and I think that would be a fantastic thing if you'd agree to it. The other point he makes is that, and you sort of alluded to it very generally, that, you know, there needs to be a separate budget identified for cycling, and I wonder if you've got any thoughts, well, on first of all the offer from Damien, and secondly the proposal to actually identify a budget and then prioritise.
I would quite happily tour the county with Damien and show him the issues that we have with cycling kind of outside the city. I think you know, the lobby groups and the cycling groups are big in the city. Quite rightly, that's where most cycling is taking place. But I do get quite frustrated at the lack of improvements we can achieve in the rural areas. It's a big problem, and I don't know how we can address that, because you know, the residents in villages, you know, should equally be, you know, able to safely cycle around. So yes, open to that. In terms of budget, it's honestly so stretched at the moment. I don't know how we progress down having a separate sort of active travel. I don't think it's quite that simple. There's a lot of, particularly at the moment because of COVID, there's a lot of moving about of money. There's some savings we've got to implement next year. So it's sort of a you know, an open door on that, and I need to sort of find out how much we can sort of allocate. I'm quite keen that we have an active travel officer. That's actually something we haven't really touched on. We have got sort of looking at the you know, the active travel plans, but I feel like we're probably in a position now where we need somebody to look at you know, road agreements for new developments, to make sure it meets the standard, to actually look at what the highways teams are doing in terms of white lining on the road. You know, particularly in Oxford, we've seen a number of cases where we've all scratched our head and gone, why the hell has this been achieved? And actually, in my mind, if that went across someone's desk who is experienced in that and knows the guidelines and knows the guidance off the back of their hand, I think it would help us as an authority to get that message across that we are taking it seriously, but also to make sure we're not making silly mistakes at unknown goals. So yes, but yeah, always happy to catch up with Damien in a safe, masked way to have a look at these.
Thank you. Catherine, have you spotted any last questions, or do you think?
No, just a totally different one about cycle theft, because it's so bad in Oxford, and whether a bike registration scheme would help. I mean, there is one there, isn't there? There is one.
Yeah, there's a national one, I thought you could register your bike.
Bike fest, did you say?
Mm.
Yeah, so again, this is where we need to work closer and better with districts or city council. I think we just rolled out a load of new bike racks right across the county, which is great. But actually, in Abingdon, some of the new ones that got in, then people have pinched the bloody bikes on the new cycle racks, which is incredibly embarrassing. So we actually need to look at more secure cycling, particularly around train stations and hubs. I think we went with Suzanne to Waltham Forest, and some of their on-street cycle security stuff is pretty impressive. And actually, it's quite cheap. We just probably haven't really thought outside the box, which again goes back to my point. I think the whole active travel sort of agenda recently has sort of woken us up a little bit, and is going to focus our minds for the future to make sure actually we're doing those sorts of things rather than not necessarily what's just cheap.
Well, words fail me. I have to say I'm most impressed at your ability to field these different questions. The chat has been fascinating and has, in all fairness, challenged many of your positions, and which you won't be surprised about. So what we'll do is condense that, because I think one point that comes over very strongly is that actually there are lots of journeys that people want to do in and around Oxfordshire, not just the city, but put off by either it being unsafe or just being very poor facilities. And I do feel that a stated priority for the county should be to get an increase in people on bikes. You should stick to a number or something that really commits you, because otherwise you're missing a great opportunity. But Liam, I can't thank you enough, and I hope that you and I might go for a ride along the A4095 one day, and I hope we continue the dialogue. Is there anything you'd like to say to the assembled audience before we?
No, I've not read all the comments. I'll have a look through.
At your leisure.
No, thank you for inviting me on, and my email inbox is always open. Both me and Yvonne, we kind of straddle this active travel and highways sort of between us both. And I much prefer email than Twitter. I think Twitter and social media could often get heated, and I do get quite frustrated when you're getting bombarded on top of everything else with lots of tweets. So always feel free to email with any suggestions, comments, improvements, stuff that's gone wrong, stuff that's gone right. I'm sure this
that would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Well, there are quite a few questions we didn't get to, Liam, so if you are able to look through, that'd be great.
Yes, no problem.
Catherine, is there anything else you want to add?
Well, just thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been really enjoyable, and I hope well, you certainly earned that glass of wine anyway, Liam. So
maybe we'll come back in a year's time and see if anything.
Good idea. Okay.
Thank you for everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.